But like we said, Congress is certainly dealing with a lot here in June 2021. Here to help us discuss all of it further is one of the members of the great deliberative body responsible for getting it all done, Congressman Jake Auchincloss, Democrat from Massachusetts' 4th Congressional District. Congressman, thanks a lot for taking the time. I do want to kick things off with just one question on this so-called select committee. Look, I know you will not weigh in about who will be in, who you'd like to see out, what members get considered, et cetera. But with investigations already out there by groups like the FBI and the DOJ into what happened, is this committee about January 6th? Is this all about making things a bit more difficult for Republicans in the midterms, similarly to what Kevin McCarthy infamously said when he put his foot in his mouth in that interview a few years ago? Is this the same thing?
This is about Congress delivering accountability and transparency for the American people after one of the low points in the history of our democracy. January 6th was an insurrection. It was an attack on our institutions, and Americans deserve to know in their people's house what happened and how we can prevent it from happening again. Speaker Pelosi extended her hand across the aisle. It was swatted away. Republicans had their chance to make this bipartisan and apolitical, and instead they chose Trump over truth.
Okay, I want to ask you about the INVEST Act here. Let's pivot now to talk about infrastructure. You're looking to repair and modernize surface transportation. We had Chairman DeFazio talk to us about the importance about this. When it comes to the conversation on infrastructure, Congressman Auchincloss, yes, there's going to be a lot of headlines. There's going to be a lot of, chase the shiny thing sort of things and sound bites and the emphasis on the Joe Manchins of the world. But you are a sitting member of Congress. What is your message to the American people? What is most important in the infrastructure conversation?
This is a generational opportunity to create a more prosperous, more productive, and more fair economy. The millennial generation is the first one on track to be worse off than our parents, and the INVEST Act is the first step in fixing that trajectory. This is about fixing roads and bridges. This is about upgrading transit. This is about expanding broadband, securing clean water, and investing in clean energy. This is generational, and this is going to create a clean energy economy that works for everybody.
Since you mentioned millennials, should young Americans, Congressman Auchincloss, Gen Zers, millennials, should they be optimistic about the work that their representatives in the federal government are doing? Because they may tune in, they see a lot of bickering, they see a lot of conspiracies, they see the fact that more than 100 of your Republican colleagues voted to, phrase it how you want, either overturn or not certify. And there's a lot of concern from young Americans that I speak with. Should they be optimistic about the future?
I think it's both and. Young Americans should be aghast, as I am, that a huge segment of the GOP is divorced from reality and is following this crazed leader into the abyss of QAnon and the big lie. But they should also be optimistic that Democrats are going to pass this infrastructure bill. We are going to ensure that you have clean water for yourself and for your kids. We're going to ensure that your connections to your jobs and to neighborhood errands are easier because we've got complete streets and transit. We're going to be looking at innovative mobility programs that connect people to jobs and services. We are looking forward, and we're not going to be hamstrung by obstructionism.
Something Chairman DeFazio and I did talk about recently, Congressman Auchincloss. If I'm not mistaken, there are 18 Republicans on the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee that are a part of this 147 that basically said, we're not going to certify, we'll have our own reasons why, and we'll spin it in our own ways. But do you find it difficult to do the work on your committee? Because I know the markup process for the INVEST Act was 19 hours, but I watched it on C-SPAN. It devolved into side fights about the culture wars and defunding the police and finger pointing over January 6th. Are you finding it difficult to work with this Republicans in this climate when what happened on January 6th, as Chairman DeFazio and I have confirmed, and we've talked about here on the show, continues to hang over everything else that it seems like you're trying to get done?
I'm sent to Congress by my constituents to advance their priorities. And in order to do that, I do need to work across the aisle and hammer out compromises. But I'm also sent here to represent their values. And in order to represent their values in a moment that we're in right now, I will not co-sponsor legislation or work with Republicans that don't recognize that Joe Biden won a free and fair election.
Has that made committee work on T&I that much more difficult?
I think it's made Congress that much more difficult. The fact that we've got a large segment of the GOP that won't support a basic pillar of our democracy, the peaceful transfer of power. Of course it's made it more difficult, but it's not going to be an excuse. We are going to pass an infrastructure bill. If we do it with Republican votes who want to deliver clean water and clean energy and better transit for their constituents, then good. But if necessary, we'll do it without the GOP votes because this is existential and this is generational.
One of the few issues where there is bipartisan compromise is the so-called China bill. Democrats, Republicans agree we got to do something to get the U.S. of A. on a better track to better compete with Beijing. Where should we be doubling down on those efforts?
The Chinese workforce is 8 times bigger than the United States workforce. So if we want to outcompete China in the 21st century, we're going to have to work 10 times smarter. That means investments in infrastructure, like I was saying, roads and bridges, transit, broadband. It also means investments in research and development. We should be making big, bold funding grants for biomedical research, for clean energy, for battery storage, for the research and development initiatives that are really going to transform our economy and create a lot of jobs.
Congressman Jake Auchincloss from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts' 4th Congressional District. Thanks a lot for making your none-of-the-above debut with us here on Cheddar News. Good to have your perspective, Representative. Thanks for being here.